Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wellness Coach Wednesdays. I'm Suzanne Monroe, founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals. I'm here today with a special guest who I'm going to introduce in just a moment. Before I do, though, let me just check in. You know, people are probably just jumping on and seeing our feed here go live. I want to make sure that you can hear us out there. So if you are out there and you can see us, go ahead, give us a little reaction, say hello in the box. Just let us know that you can actually see us and hear us out there. Let's take a minute to do that. I see a little thumbs up from somebody, so that's good. And we'll give you guys a little bit of time to jump on and join us live, and hopefully just introduce yourself and let us know why you're here. It sounds you can hear us and see us. That's great. And while you're doing that, I just want to acknowledge you for joining us today for this event. And whether you're watching us live or you're watching this a little bit later, we've got people across the globe that are joining us for Wellness Coach Wednesdays, which is kind of a fun event that we do to bring you the latest in holistic health and wellness and really feature top experts who are really at the top of their game, bringing you something very, very specific to learn about, whether it applies to you or to your own practice if you're a coach or practitioner. So you might be joining us today because you want to learn more about our topic, emotional eating, for yourself, or you might be a wellness coach or another holistic practitioner or coach, and you want to be able to help your own clients with emotional eating, or you're just totally new to us and you want to learn about the IAWP in our community and this is your first time. So welcome to you if that's the case, and just welcome to everybody, no matter why you're joining us. And I see we've got more viewers joining us, and say hello out there. Let us know you're out there. And if you can hear and see us, that would be great. And we're going to dive into our topic here, because I'm here today with Tricia Nelson of Heal Your Hunger. And our topic is Heal Your Hunger, How to End Emotional Eating Now. And Tricia has a very interesting story. She lost 50 pounds by identifying and healing the underlying causes of her emotional eating. And since then, she spent nearly 30 years actually researching the hidden causes of the addictive personality. She's an emotional eating expert. She's the author of the #1 best-selling book, Heal Your Hunger, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. And Tricia's also the host of a popular podcast called The Heal Your Hunger Show. She's a highly regarded speaker and coach. She's been featured on NBC, CBS, KTLA, Fox, Discovery Health. And, Tricia and I actually have known each other for many years in the wellness field. And she was one of my first guest teachers. Gosh, I think almost a decade ago, we were trying to figure this out. So I'm just excited to be reconnecting with her. She's been doing so much in this field. Welcome, Tricia, to the event.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I can't believe it's been that long. I think you're right.
Yeah, and it's just amazing. I mean, the fact that you have spent 30 years really researching this topic, and I love that you're so narrowed in on a specific topic. And obviously it's because it's been a part of your own journey, which is kind of really what I want to hear from you first. And I think just to share with people, like, how did you actually get started with this whole journey as it relates to emotional eating and got to kind of where you are now with your Heal Your Hunger business?
Yes, I started way back when researching emotional eating by doing it. So I was an emotional eater, I think, from the get-go. And I just loved food. I loved to eat it. I loved to cook it. I loved to serve it to other people. When I was a kid, I played a restaurant with my sisters and, cook and serve. And it was just the highlight for me. And as I got older, I started to gain weight, and it was really rough for me. I mean, older meaning like 9, 10, 11, 12, getting into puberty. And I really blew up like a balloon, and it was so awful to me. I had this roll on my tummy, and I'd scrunch it up in my hands, and I'd imagine cutting it off like you sliced off fat off the side of a steak. Or I'd imagine like going to the army and being forced to exercise in boot camp because I hated to exercise, or getting a terrible disease where I'd automatically become emaciated without any effort on my part. So some pretty out there thoughts, on what to do about my weight, because not eating as much wasn't really frankly, it didn't cross my mind. It was like, I'm just overweight and I want to get this weight off of me. And so they're pretty violent thoughts. And I didn't really know what to do. And I started dieting and doing exercise programs. And then I was just on this quest to deal with my weight and my food issue. And I, did diets and pills and potions and lotions and went to 12-step programs and eating disorders therapy. I mean, I did so many different things and nothing I tried was working. And I felt so desperate. And by the age of 21, I literally just felt like I'd done so much research and didn't get to the bottom of my problem that I really felt like I was hopeless. And, that's obviously at 21 years old to feel like you're washed up is a pretty depressing thing. And I didn't know what to do. And I thankfully met a man who is a spiritual healer, and he really showed me how to not face the food issue, but face what was underlying the food. He told me that food and weight were not my problem. And I think I knew that at an intuitive level, but when your house is on fire and you're overeating and you're gaining weight, it just seems like food's the issue, and you got to get weight off. And he showed me how to really face and deal and heal with the underlying causes. And that was what changed everything for me. And that's when I really started understanding emotional eating, accepting I was an emotional eater, and really applying a solution. And my life completely turned around at that point. And then I started, we worked together to help other people. And more recently with Heal Your Hunger, I've been taking this work online and showing people a very precise formula for ending emotional eating, because I think it's really, it's not very well understood. And so I was, as you said, 50 pounds overweight, but I've been living, thankfully, in a thin body for close to 30 years now. So I'm just so grateful to have a solution. And I'm so passionate about getting it into the hands of other people and other coaches who can then share it with other people, because, people are suffering. And, as the weight loss industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and 98% of all diets fail. So probably 98% of most of what people do is getting them nothing and accept more of the same. And I really believe emotional eating is the reason why, everybody's talking, controlling food or controlling your weight or dealing with exercise. And this little, secret is that people who chronically struggle with food and weight are emotional eaters. So that's my passion. That's what I'm doing here. And it's all definitely based in my own story and the pain of not being able to control one's intake of food. I don't know anything worse than that.
Wow, that is quite a story and quite a journey. And it sounds like it didn't just happen like overnight. It sounds like this was kind of a long path, and you unraveled it all and then ultimately uncovered the solution. And I have to say, you mentioned, now you've been living in this thin body. And of course you're here on camera and it's like, wow, this person cannot be an emotional eater. She looks fantastic. But that kind of made me think, is emotional eating only showing up with people who are overweight? Like, could you be thin and actually be an emotional eater as well?
Absolutely. Yes. So many people come to me who don't really have a weight problem, but they're compelled to eat. And frankly, I mean, it can be just as bad for them, especially because so many professionals are kind of like, really, like go tell it on a mountain, So it's really hard when somebody's compelled to eat, even if they're thin. Because they feel like they're crazy. It's like, I mean, the obsession with food just takes over one's life. And, it's a 24/7 thoughts about food, where to get food, how to eat it. Obviously for people who do gain weight, it's a whole nother, ugly layer of how do I get rid of the weight? How do I get rid of what I just ate? How do I work it off? There's all that. So that's, it's worse from that standpoint. But in terms of this condition really falling between one's ears, a person with any, whatever size they are, can really be haunted by food and this obsession and compulsion. And I'm sure it's equally frustrating. I mean, I'm somebody who gains weight easily, so that wasn't my story, but I've certainly, seen many clients who are, they're really brought to their knees by their eating behavior, and it does bother them, even though they're not packing on the pounds.
So weight is kind of like one symptom, but you're saying there could be other manifestations of how this shows up for somebody.
Totally. I mean, yes, absolutely. And when somebody is obsessed with food, it is a symptom. I mean, it's not the problem. And so, and that's the important thing to know is so much of the time we're trying to attack it at the problem level. But, you know, when, in my experience, obsessions of any kind, I don't care if somebody is obsessed with, you know, pedophilia, or they're obsessed with gambling or shopping or, you know, ooey gooey chewy foods, whatever the obsession, it's not really the problem. It's really a coping mechanism. You know, there's three primary emotions that drive addictions, and I call it the PEP. You know, if somebody wants to check out this with themselves when they're in the middle of an addiction or they're feeling addicted, I call it the PEP test. And the P stands for painkiller. So our obsessions with food and any other substance or activity really serves as a painkiller because we have pain. Now, emotional eaters typically have trauma in their past. And so they've buried a lot of pain. They had traumatic experiences as a child, whether it be sexual or emotional or physical. You know, they're burying pain. They use food. I mean, food is one of the first addictions we can get our hands on, that and masturbation, you know, and so it's like fantasy as well. Fantasy, masturbation, and food are like, people start that at a very young age and they use it to check out, and it's because they're in pain. And that was true for me, is that I, you know, had sexual abuse in my past. I mean, I had dysfunction in my family. It could have been a lot worse, but I definitely had dysfunction, and so food was just my solace. It was my comfort. And then we take that habit of turning to food so we don't feel, we take that into our adult lives. So food is typically a painkiller for people. And it doesn't matter if they weren't abused as children, you know, we all have pain in our lives. You know, life is not easy. And so whether it's a tough job or a tough boss or, you know, just anxiety or depression or whatever it is, we have pain and we use food to medicate that pain. The E in the PEP test stands for escape. And emotional eaters especially have a lot of fear. And so there's a lot about life that we just want to escape from. And food is a great way to do it. We get our favorite binge foods and our favorite binge TV programs. And we sit in front of the TV and we're just like, leave me alone. You know, I'm checked out, you know? So it's like the Charlie Brown, you know, the doctor, what is it? The doctor is in, well, the doctor's out, you know, regarding, you know, our eating habits. And we just need that escape. And it's also true that emotional eaters are also typically very responsible. You know, we're good doobies typically. You know, it's sort of funny. You oftentimes emotional eaters are married to alcoholics, like they go together like peanut butter and jelly, you know. And so the alcoholic is off doing all these aberrant, you know, behaviors and being bad boys. And it could be reverse genders, obviously. And then the emotional eater is picking up the pieces, doing the caretaking and being codependent. And so we often carry so much responsibility and we're so good that's another reason why we want to escape, is like we just want to like check out because we've been carrying this burden of being a good girl for so long. So that's the E in the PEP test. Now the last P in PEP, it stands for punishment. And emotional eaters carry, you know, we're deep feelers and we carry an inordinate amount of guilt. So we feel deeply and we feel guilt feelings very easily and deeply. And this often, and whether appropriate or inappropriate, I mean, oftentimes we just grew up, you know, feeling bad, you know, whether we were sort of conditioned that way to believe we were bad, or, you know, oftentimes when we're afraid, because we have a lot of fear, we tend to act from that fear and we cause ourselves to feel guilty. You know, we do crappy things out of fear. You know, we take the low road and feel bad about it. And so whatever the cause of the guilt, we oftentimes use food as a form of punishment. And this is something people miss because it seems like food is reward, you know, that the I deserve it binge at the end of a long day. You know, again, our favorite foods and just the right amounts, the salty and the sweet. And then we're sitting in front of the television and we just feel like we're in seventh heaven. But the next day when our pants don't fit, we feel disgusting. We cancel appointments with friends because we don't want to be seen. You know, that is a punishment that we we have brought upon ourselves. And it's really because of this buried subconscious guilt that we carry. So I always tell people to use that PEP test to just sort of do a check-in with what's going on. But it's just really important to know that that's really what's happening. And so food, as I said, is a symptom. You know, the eating is a symptom, but it's these other causes underneath that we start to need to get to take a look at.
Well, I like that. That kind of gives people a starting point to kind of look at this. And I got to say, people are chiming in over here. Mary is saying food and weight are not the problem, agreeing with you. And there is a question coming up, I think, about something you just said. So let's take a peek at that. And if you guys do have questions, we may not be able to get to them all, but go ahead, type them in the box and we'll try to get to you. Chris does have a question, it sounds like, about this, where he's wondering if you're aware of the leptin pathway receptor in the brain controlling hunger and energy expenditure. Stress or inflammation can lead to this resistance, which can lead to overfeeding. Is this at all what you're talking about, or is this kind of a different take on it?
I write about the leptin, and ghrelin, connection in my book. But I don't actually spend a lot of time on it because, in my experience, if somebody chronically struggles with food and weight, yes, I mean, we have those habits and those pathways, and it's definitely out of whack, especially if we've been overeating for a long time. Sort of like which came first, the overeating to create these reactions hormonally, or do we have our hormonal issues and then it creates the overeating? And it's probably some of both. But I do find that not enough focus is put on emotions that drive our eating. And so much of the time, emotional eaters want to find the science to justify, make sense of why they're eating. But that doesn't change anything because they still keep eating and they still keep being hungry. And I have found that the hunger is far more emotional than it is physical. And so that's really why I beat that drum, because I know as an emotional eater, all the understanding in the world of the science doesn't really change, my desire for a cookie when I'm face to face with a cookie. And so that's really what I like to dig into, is what are those emotions, and not just the emotions, but what ways am I living my life that are creating those emotions that are driving me to eat?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. That makes so much sense. And it kind of reminds me, before this interview, I was thinking, well, gosh, I'm really not an emotional eater. So this is kind of interesting. I don't know if I can fully relate to this. But then I kind of went back in time and I was like, there was a period in my time when I was emotional eating. And at the time, I didn't really realize it. But as time went on, it got worse. And I was always going for sugar. And what it came back to is I was just so stressed out at my job. And I was so unhappy with what I was doing. So I was looking for this sort of pleasure and satisfaction outside of myself, because internally, I wasn't really filling myself up. So I was thinking a little bit about that. And, some people are posting now, kind of wondering a little bit more about emotional eating, which brings me to a good question here, because I think they're trying to figure out, am I an emotional eater or not? How does someone know if they're an emotional eater or more of a food addict? Are these two different things?
Okay, so the way I see it is that we are all emotional eaters. Like God made us this way. And I believe it's just, just like, we all like sex feels good, so does eating. Okay. So, and that's so that we can subsist as a, as a planet and really as a species. So I say baseline, we're all emotional eaters. Then where do we take it? And I really believe it's a spectrum. And it's a matter of where you are on the spectrum. On the low end is emotional eating. On the high end is food addiction, just all out food addiction, which I fall into that category. I've sat in front of the TV with 4,000 calories of food and just eaten it until I couldn't breathe. Okay. So some people take it that far and it debilitates their life. They can lose their job over it. They can lose, relationships. They can stop paying their bills. They can lose, their ability to have good hygiene. I mean, it's really an addiction, and it takes them to a very dark place, just like alcoholism or drug addiction does with the alcoholic or the drug addict. So, but obviously not everybody's at that point. And so I do have a quiz, which we talked about before, which I do feel, the need to mention, and it's an emotional eating quiz, and it's on my website at healyourhunger.com, and it will actually give you a personalized score, so you can determine where you are on that spectrum, because it's important to know. And just like you're saying, Suzanne, you didn't realize you're an emotional eater, and I think a lot of people don't, because they use weight as a marker or binging as a marker, and so you don't have to be a binger to be an emotional eater. And so I think it's important should, take the quiz and get your personalized score for sure. But it's definitely a spectrum. And the spectrum is really determined, I think, by the consequences that your, eating habits are really causing in your life. I mean, that's when we're prompted to do something about it, is when, it hurts, when we feel the pain of it, either by weight gain or by health issues, or by literally other people in our life saying, I don't want to be around you. All you think about and talk about is food.
Yeah, exactly. I love that you say that there's a spectrum, though, because I think this opens this up to such a bigger audience. People are thinking, oh, that's not me. Oh, wait a second, that could be me. And I do want to go to a question now that kind of applies here from Aiden, who's saying, if you are an emotional eater, do you always eat when you're down or depressed? Or could it also be the case that you do it when you're happy or overjoyed? I'm kind of curious about when people are emotional eating.
That's an awesome question. In my experience, it's both. And everybody's different, obviously. I mean, there's some people who might be emotional eaters and they don't eat when they're stressed. Like they go the opposite direction. It's never been my issue, but I'm saying I know people who literally, they have weight issues, and yet when they're super stressed, they lose their appetite. But people who are emotional eaters are in the habit of eating over any emotion. And so sometimes, believe it or not, that, the high highs, the feelings of feeling good or connected or sexual, sexual feelings can bring up a lot of stuff for people, especially if they have sexual abuse in their past, they have intimacy issues. So there are many good feelings that can drive an emotional eater to overeat as well, because feelings in general are tough to feel. Like it's uncomfortable, and it's a lot to hold within our bodies, especially when we're used to medicating. So if somebody's used to medicating, they're pretty much going to use food at any time of the day or night over any emotion that they feel, because it's such an ingrained habit. I feel good, I'm going to celebrate. I feel bad, I'm going to drown my sorrows in ice cream, but the truth is that feeling in general is tough for the emotional eater.
Well, this is very interesting, because it's like getting to the root cause. And I love this because it's really a holistic approach. And it's what we teach as it relates to wellness as well. Like, you can look at all these external factors, but what's really happening on the inside. So this makes total sense. I'm curious, is there more to emotional eating than just eating too much and eating for emotional reasons? I mean, or is this kind of the whole picture here?
No, there's so much more to it. And that's why I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because emotional eating, the emotional eater is somebody who doesn't just eat too much or eat the wrong foods or have food obsessions. It's somebody who responds to life in a different way than your average person. And this has a lot more to do with our personality type. And there really is, I call it the anatomy of the emotional eater. So there's a composite of personality traits that make up the emotional eater. And this is what really gets us into trouble in the first place. So the cravings that we have are typically they're set off by ways that we are being in the world on account of this personality, this anatomy of the emotional eater. And I'll give you an example. Emotional eaters are, in terms of they're 24 traits, okay? So in the top of the 24 traits is people pleasing. And so emotional eaters are consummate people pleasers. And part of this is, you can trace back to having trauma in our past, or something, some low self-esteem, environment where we felt bad about ourselves, and we try to get really validation from outside of us. Now, this is a human, nature thing to do, but emotional eaters take it, they take the cake on this. Okay, pardon the pun. So basically, we're people pleasers. And so we're looking for validation outside of us much more than inside of us. And the problem is that causes us to do certain things like overcommit ourselves. Overeaters are overdoers. Okay, so we're overcommitting. We're saying yes to projects that we have no business getting into. We're doing our kids' homework assignments far beyond the point where, we should have stopped. We're just this, this can-do person who wants validation at all costs. And the price is us. Okay, so we're out there doing, and we're not, first of all, we're skipping meals, perfect setup for a binge. We're not taking care of ourselves. We're eating on the run. And at the end of the day, we're exhausted because we've put out so much. And we're also typically resentful. Emotional eaters are very resentful because we always have a smile on our face. We're always so nice and we're always doing for others. And we never get the validation we're looking for. We never get the credit that we expect, that we need for our self-esteem. And so we're not only exhausted, and put out, but we're pissed off. And that's the perfect prescription for a binge. And we, as I said, have the I deserve it binge. Like nobody else is congratulating me on the job well done. I'm going to congratulate myself with this beautiful, batch of cookies and ice cream and my favorite TV show. And so that's a good example of a personality trait that is typical among emotional eaters that literally causes our cravings. And this is why I say the emotional is really important part to look at in the emotional eating, pattern, because, there are certain ways that we're living in our lives that have to change if we're going to have success with weight loss. And so much of the time, good coaches are teaching people what to eat, how to, self-care and this kind of thing. But what they don't know about their clients is they're out there creating wreckage on a daily basis within their lives and within their psyche that is compelling them to eat at the end of the day, no matter how much good information and whatever protocols you've given them, that they have, because they're not living according to, really their guidance, their deepest guidance. And the people pleasing is a problem. Also, emotional eaters, as I said, are deep feelers. And so we need ways to deal with our emotions that are a lot more healthy than just turning to food to really shut them down. And so there's a lot of living skills that we need, and we need to be retrained on in order to not end up in the food at the end of the day. The food is like the caboose on the train, okay? There's many cars before that caboose, and those are the cars that we need to put a spotlight on and start making changes in. Otherwise, the caboose is inevitable. It's going to be following all the other cars, just like the binge is going to follow all the other, ways that we're living that end up that way.
Well, yeah, this is super interesting. And I just want to pick up on something you said there, which was, people who are wellness coaches or practicing and in practice and supporting people with this, just telling people what to do and giving them advice about what to eat may not solve the issue if the person is emotional eater. It reminds me actually when I first got started, before I actually developed a coaching method that went to that level, I was faced with people who were emotional eating, and exactly, it just didn't work by telling them what to do. And so I think this is really important. I know we have a lot of coaches and practitioners joining us, so I want to dive in a little bit more to that. But we are getting a question from someone that kind of fits on this thread. So let me just pull that up. BA is asking about how about when people are emotional eaters, but they actually lack motivation to change? Like, how do we fix that bigger picture? I mean, is it people start to identify their emotional eating, but like, why should they change?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. But I will just tell you that, and this is why I love talking to this crowd, because you're seeing this, you're on the front line seeing this problem and seeing people, fall down time and time again with what they say they want. It's not always panning out with what they do. And that's why it's just really important to understand sort of the breadth of what emotional eating is really about. And when somebody just doesn't feel like they have motivation, it's really important to know that, especially looking at this as an addiction, I think does help from the standpoint of understanding how much it affects one's psyche. So when somebody is, set off and they are, quote, in the food, okay, they're binging and they're overeating and they're just hooked on that sugar and carb cycle. When they're in that, they're in an altered state. Okay, they are in the grips of a compulsion that colors everything they're doing. So when you talk to somebody like that, they're not their right selves, and you've probably experienced this. Like, you're on the phone with them, and it's like, hello, like where are you? You know, where are you? Come back. You know, you're not the Susie I know. And it's because this is a very powerful and cunning, you know, addiction. And when somebody's in that dark hole, you know, I call it darkness, you know, it's hard to get through to them in that moment. And that's why it is, you know, so important to get them, you know, obviously eating in a way that's healthy, that where they can clear up their mind. But it's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? You know, do you get them healthy and then they can, you know, have a better attitude, or do you help them have a better attitude then get healthy? And again, it's both. But if somebody's in that dark hole, just recognize that, first of all, what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a real addiction where somebody's lost in that terrible cycle. And that compulsion to eat is real. And that addiction to sugar is real. You know, it is real, and it's definitely physiological. And when somebody's in the grips of it, it's so hard for them to snap out of it. And so I just say that so that you're recognizing that you're literally dealing with an addict at this point, you know, and it's hard to get through to. I mean, if somebody calls you up and they're, you know, they've been sober in AA and they call you up and they're drunk, you're probably not going to get far with them that night at midnight, you know, and you're going to need to wait till they're a little bit more clear. So, but so regarding somebody who acts like they're not motivated, what I would say is, they may not be motivated, but they also might be under the influence at that time. And so when you're under the influence, it's hard to get excited about anything. That's why exercise is a tricky thing for emotional eaters, because while on paper, exercise is really important along with good nutrition, if somebody's in that fog of overeating and that sugar, you know, compulsion, and they've been binging, the last thing they want to do is exercise, and they don't have motivation to exercise. But they can get motivation, and I know I'm kind of, you know, walking around the barn here, but but my point in saying this is that they can get it back. And so don't necessarily take their word for it that they're not motivated. Of course, they're not motivated when they're in the thick of the addiction, but that doesn't mean overall they're not. I mean, motivation is probably a bad word, because they're not motivated clearly, but that doesn't mean they don't want it. They just can't see how to get there. And obviously that's your job as a coach, is to help them get there. Some pointers on how to do that. Definitely take baby steps. You know, everything is a win. When you're in that terrible quicksand of food addiction, everything that's in the direction of pulling out of it is a win, and celebrate the wins. As I told you, emotional eaters love validation. So, you know, whatever gold star system you can set up, you know, I think is great, because they desperately need the validation, and the atta girls, there's no question about it, and atta boys too, if you have male clients. So that's really, really important. They also, it's really important to know that, as I said before, the food is a symptom of something deeper. So there are deeper issues going on that you can focus on. And I don't mean you have to do therapy with your clients, but getting too hung up on getting them to eat right might be a distraction from what's really going on. And so you want to always sort of take a pause, you know, on the physical suggestions, and dig deeper with them. And at the end of the day, what these clients really need is a lot of love. They are starving. Emotional eaters are starving. And so just remember, there's a great saying, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so just always try to remember, it's very frustrating, first of all, I have to say, dealing with somebody who is in the food, you know, and can't find their way out. And you know that if they followed your plan, they'd be doing well, but they're not following your plan. So I get the frustration of that as a coach. But just know that they're deeply wounded and they crave love. And so if you could sort of get out of the head of, why aren't they doing this, you know, to your heart of, wow, this is a hurting soul whose main coping tool is food. Like, it's life and death for her. Like, she, you know, emotional eaters feel like they're going to die if they don't have their sugar or their carbs, you know, or whatever else. And so you're dealing at a very primal level with these people. And so it's just important to keep that in mind as you're working with them, and not to say you have to cater to that, to that dark and sick side of them. But it's just really important to keep in mind, like this is somebody in deep pain, fear, and guilt. Like they're fettered by these things, and that's what's really driving them right now. And I just find when I can get into my heart and really love them, they need that more than everything.
I mean, I love that you share this, because this really is like soul level work, and it makes sense. You got to look at the whole picture, and I love your approach with that, and I guess I want to kind of go full circle here, because we've said, this is, really loving that person who's struggling that much. And maybe that case, we've already identified their emotional eater. And then we talked about the person who's there in your office. Obviously they're motivated for some reason, they're working with you, but maybe they don't see how to get there. But then, there's people that are literally eating because they're physically hungry. Like their food is so out of whack, and they're filling up with processed foods, things without nutrients, and they're just eating all day long because literally they're not getting the energy and nutrition. How do you differentiate between the emotional hunger of somebody who's, eating a lot versus like this physical hunger where they're eating because they're just not eating the right stuff?
Well, and that's why, your coaches they're in such a perfect position, because they've got the training and the knowledge to be able to address the physical, and really work with them and help them see, the gaps in their diet. I mean, any amount of greens they can add to their diet is going to feed them and feed their brains in a level that hasn't been fed in a while, probably. So it's really a multi-pronged approach. You can't just talk about emotions all the time, and they've got to start eating better. There's no question about it. They have to start having some good nutrition so they can think straight, so their hormones are working, and firing at the proper levels. And so I think it's both. I think you combine both of these approaches at all times. And, with some people, it's going to be slower progress than others. And for some people, people typically want the diet. It's like, tell me what to eat, so if you have the diet, definitely give them the diet, and get them working on that and feeling good about that. Just know that will only last so long. You have to put the foundation, the emotional foundation underneath that. And that's where things get lost. That's why 98% of all diets fail, is people want the diet, but they don't do anything about, what got them overweight in the first place. And so it has to be both, so they can get, a complete system of support.
Yeah, I love that. It's really, I love you said multi-pronged approach. It really is a holistic approach. I think it answers another question out there. Does Tricia believe that adding in might help? Adding in is something we talk about, where you're really you're not necessarily taking away all those things that they're going for in emotional eating, but you're adding in those healthy things. It starts to kind of build that foundation. But you're right, you got to address all of these things. It makes total sense. I don't know if we just covered this, but I want to make sure I did ask you, because I know you have certain things you recommend a person do to end emotional eating now. Is there anything, did we cover that yet?
Well, something that's really important is self-care, obviously. Okay. And just like I talked about the personality traits that somebody has to start addressing in order to not crave, and in order to not end up stressed. Like you said, a job situation, there's always things in somebody's life, that is adding to their stress, and that has to be addressed. But what I recommend for emotional eaters always is to start their day with a self-care regime, if you will. And that's a terrible word. Most people don't like how militaristic that sounds, but it has to be a self-care ritual. That's a better word. And there's a few things that are absolutely non-negotiables, and that is starting the day with self-care, whether it be meditation. I call them the 6 self-care success secrets. So meditation, prayer, walking, reading spiritual literature, writing in a journal. These are different things that are vital that one start their day with. And everybody should. It's not like just, necessary for emotional eaters, but the point of it for the emotional eater is that, emotional eaters are typically, they get stressed very easily, and they create stress very easily. And so starting the day in prayer and meditation, for instance, is a way to get still and quiet and centered. And centeredness is one of the steps that I have in my 7 simple step process, because as I said, we get our validation typically from outside of us. Emotional eaters are always, looking for approval from outside, always looking, for what other people's opinions are. And then we're like chameleons to other people's opinions and energy. And so we have to get centered and start finding out what our energy is and start checking in with ourselves. And this centeredness routine in the morning is vital, because throughout the day, we will seek, energy and strength from food because we're out of it. Like we've been going so fast and so furious that we're out of energy, we're out of fuel, and we seek it from that quick, the snacking and the carbs and sugar foods that give us the quick hit. So we've got to start establishing an inner resource of strength. And to me, that's a spiritual strength. But it doesn't have to be, I'm not religious, but it has to be, I believe we're all guided, divinely guided, and within us is a source of strength that we can call on, but we have to nurture that and we have to connect with it first thing in the morning. Otherwise, we're like a ricochet on, on a pinball and a pinball machine. And so it's really important to get people to know that they need that source of strength, because you can't just take food away from emotional eaters. I said, they're depending on that to get them through. They are dependent on their, special foods, their favorite foods, the ooey gooey chewy foods. That's what gets them by. And if you just take that away, it will only last for a short period of time before they go back to it. And so we have to replace what they're getting from food with something else, a source of strength from elsewhere. And so self-care is the best way to produce that. And so I meditate twice a day, and I always say my afternoon meditation is anybody who meditates in the afternoon before dinner will shave about 200 calories off of what they eat for dinner. because it's like when we're going at such a high pace at the end of the day, we've been driving the kids around, we've been, at work, we've been answering phone calls, checking our texts and all this kind of thing. And we walk into the house, forget about it. Like you walk into the kitchen, like you're dead on arrival. And so it's just really important to take a time out first before you go into that kitchen. So in the morning and in the afternoon is a good time to recharge and get this source of strength from a different place other than food.
Well, I love everything you're saying about source of strength and doing the self-care, because obviously huge for emotional eaters, but so important for everybody else. Just a reminder, and I think for myself too, I've been meditating and practicing spirituality, and I always try to cover that basis in the morning, but I don't have that afternoon one. I'm like, hey, I think I'm going to add that in now, because it's an ongoing thing. And really people are just, there's so much going on today, more than ever. Do you think emotional eating's on the rise? Because people are they're so stressed out. There's so many things coming at them today. This is a problem that I think isn't going away anytime soon.
No, it's worse than ever. It's so crazy because technology is so cool. I love living in this day and age where we can talk to each other like this and other people can tune in. It's so cool, but it definitely starts adding more stress to our day. And just between that and Facebook, and all the messaging coming from everywhere, it's overwhelming. And we've got to be disciplined about taking the time out. Just we give them to our kids, like why not us?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is such good stuff. Tricia, I could talk to you forever. I want to be, cognizant of your time as well. And I know you have something special for people who are joining us today, who are coaches, who are practitioners, who are out there really supporting clients and want to be able to support them with healing their hunger. Let's talk a little bit about that and how people can take the next step.
Totally. I've put together, because I knew I was coming here to talk with you and with your tribe, I put together a really cool freebie that is amazingly valuable. So it's a free training, but it's got so much information that you'll love. And it's called 5 Things Your Weight Loss Clients Aren't Telling You and Why It's Costing You Business. So I designed this specifically to help people know about how to create a deeper connection with your clients so they trust you and want to work with you long term. The one word that you should never use with your clients who are emotional eaters, also hidden reasons why they're sabotaging their weight loss success, how to help your clients stop comfort eating, and the number one form of support that will definitely ensure your clients' success. So I'd love to share that with people. I think that will prove really helpful.
Oh, that is awesome. That sounds very juicy. I posted the URL up there, but I also put it in the comments, so you can just kind of click on it there. But you can go over to free.healyourhunger.com/5 things and get that juicy stuff that you have to share. I thought that sounds really applicable for everybody. And I know you said if for some reason you're joining us and you're not a coach or practitioner, or you're just also still on your own emotional healing, your own hunger journey, you can also just go to healyourhunger.com and take that free quiz to get started. Both of those sound like amazing resources. So thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Well, before we get ready to end, is there any final comments, anything I didn't ask you about, anything we have to share before we sign off?
Oh, from me? I thought you were reading your comments. No, I just appreciate everybody tuning in. And if I can be helpful in any way, I really, really want to, because we together have a mission to help heal the world. And this is, this emotional eating piece to me is really the crux of the problem, not only in one's weight issues, but autoimmunity, cancer, diabetes. I mean, all these issues, if you think about it, all stem from what people are eating and the foods that they're eating. And, just having information isn't enough, because most people know, what causes them trouble and what doesn't, or what makes them healthy and what causes them trouble, but they don't know how to stop. So thank you for joining me and helping people really take a look at this and start to heal it.
Well, thanks for being with us today, Tricia. This was awesome. And I know we're just scratching the surface, but I think it gave people such a great view of this topic and how really there's more to learn here. So I encourage everybody to take that next step and learn a little bit more from you and get on this journey. And also, if you're just joining us for the first time and you want to be updated about Wellness Coach Wednesdays to hear from other amazing speakers like Tricia, I've gone ahead and posted a link right in the comments section where you can go to be updated about future interviews. And again, just want to thank everybody for being here, and thank you especially, Tricia. This was awesome having you here. I'm glad we got to reconnect again after so much time.
Me too. It's been fun, and I love the work that you're doing in the world. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Tricia. We'll hopefully talk to you again soon. And take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.